It's time for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast, answering your questions from the General's quarters every week, right here on Volquest.
A good Thursday, everybody, and welcome to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. I'm Eric Cain, Austin Price, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs here to answer your question. Volquest.com. Don't forget $1 for 1 year, and always subscribe, like the video on YouTube by searching Volquest. Sam Smith, 22-33. Does Tennessee try anything new in terms of personnel in the secondary coming off the bye week? Austin, I feel like outside of D. Williams, personnel will likely look like the same. Just might be a difference in scheme this week.
I'll go no. I just, until I see it, it's hard for me to believe it. And so I'll go with it'll be the same group, at least to start the game. Now, again, that might change once they get going and, they put somebody else in, but I think to at least start this football game, it'll be the same group. But I think you're right. I think that's where they can be different as scheme and not allow 64 yards of pad.
I think you're going to see D. Williams, and I think you'll see him early in this game. Now, see the difference? I'm not saying that. I know a lot of people
start? You calling him start?
I'm not saying he starts, but I think you see him early. I do. I think they want to see kind of what they have there. If he's healthy enough to go. If he's healthy enough to play in the third quarter, then he should be healthy enough to play in the first quarter. I don't think he'll return punts, but I do think you'll see him out there in an early series just to kind of see what that looks like. Because, Rob, I just feel like they're grasping for some kind of help, for some kind of answer at the corner spot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at the Florida game is as far as you need to look. You look out there and just within a few plays or certainly within a few series, you got Brandon Turnage out there. There's a Deshaun Rucker sighting. I mean, I don't think they're shy about trying new things at corner. I just don't think they've stumbled on anything that's the right answer yet, personnel-wise. And I'm with you, AP, and I know you said it too, Huber. I would feel like you need to tweak the scheme to some degree so you're not, surrendering 8-10 yards, every time with no contest.
I am with the fans, though, from a standpoint of and this is not secondary, but this is D. Williams not being able to do it. Like, if Barryon Brown can return punts for Kentucky, then Squirrel White can return punts for Tennessee. Like, the whole, Trayvon Flowers, he's the surest hand safety guy. Okay, fine. If they're punting from the 50 or the 40 and you're trying to make sure that, somebody doesn't catch one inside the 10 or the 5, that's one thing. But I think if you're just trying to return a kick, I'd have number 10 back there. That's me. That's just me.
I don't disagree with that idea, but here's why I think it's a little bit different. Kentucky has a harder time scoring, right? Offensively. Driving the length of the field is not point. Kentucky's strength. They're looking for plays. If you're Tennessee, I mean, you're almost content with the way Hendon Hooker's playing right now just to have the football at the end of the punt. So I think there's a little more, make sure you have the football. I'm not saying Squirrel White's going to fumble it, but I think because of the high-octane offense and the way it's going, Tennessee doesn't have to necessarily generate as many big plays in special teams. You would like to. I would like to see Squirrel White. I'm on board with you, AP. I think there may be the hesitancy is a little bit more of, let's just make sure Hendon's got the ball to start the drive because we feel like he can score on any possession against anybody.
Let's go to Bassmaster Vol. If Lang is a guard, Austin, who is the priority targets now at offensive tackle?
Welcome to the portal.
Yeah, or the Lamu kid. Again, I think Lang could maybe play right tackle, but I think he's a guard. It's kind of like Addison Nichols can play right tackle, but in reality, I think he's better suited to play guard. So you're looking for left tackles if you can get them. You're looking for length, and so that's where Tennessee's trying to figure out some help there. Obviously, they feel decent enough about where they are with, Gerald Mincey halfway through the season, and he's got several years left. Where you would feel okay with going into next year, at least on one side. But Darnell, unless he doesn't grade out well, is probably going to be headed to the NFL. So
we got a basketball and a football one here with Lawton's number going into the Raptors at TBA. who do you think in football and basketball have a chance to join him? Was thinking Eric Berry in football, Grant Williams in basketball. Rob, is there anybody that comes to mind in hoops and in football from you?
Oh, those are the two I would say, but they'll have to. I mean, Hubbard, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think either one of those guys meet the criteria. But I mean, Chris didn't either. I mean, it was a special Rick Barnes dispensation. There's a lot of language in there. If you go look at about extenuating circumstances where you can take it to a panel and vote on what you consider worthy candidates. But Grant is the one that would come to mind for me. I mean, two SEC Player of the Year awards is pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean, that criteria was written to get Peyton Manning in immediately, and that's why there's so much of the pro criteria in there.
Didn't they soften that though when Johnny had his number or his jersey retired? It's not the number,
yeah, but there's a difference in jersey retirement, number retirements as well. You still wear you're going to. Are you allowed to wear that number? Are you not allowed to wear that number moving forward? So there's a little bit of that going on, but the initial criteria made it really, really hard for anybody to have their number retired unless they had a superior pro career, not a solid pro career, but a superior pro career, which is why a guy like Al Wilson didn't fit the criteria. And I think the criteria should be hard, but it was really heavy pro, Rob, when you look back at that criteria. It was a lot about what you did in the professional ranks, in some ways even more so than what you did in the college ranks.
Yeah, I mean it's nuts, and I have it in front of me right now because I was curious. You have to have 3 of the 5, Hubbard. 3 of these 5 criteria you have to do: SEC Player of the Year, National Player of the Year award, like the Sullivan Award or something in football, first team All-American, and then a career record holder in a quote significant category. So it doesn't tell you what that category is, but
that's subjective.
Very subjective. That was determined by a committee, and or Tennessee won a national championship during your career, and like I said, there's some language in there about extenuating circumstances. There's a nominating committee that will determine an individual getting who will be nominated, and is made up by different people. So I mean, there's some wiggle room in there, but it's tough. I mean, it should be tough, but I felt like it was a little too tough originally. When if a guy like Chris Lofton has to get special dispensation, then maybe you need to take another look at it.
Yeah, and this is a conversation for another day, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but who cares what they did in the pros, right? I mean, if you're getting your jersey or number retired at Tennessee, that should be all that matters. But nonetheless, let's go to KJ in 3. A big win by Tennessee over LSU. Besides Hooker, blank showed up on offense and blank showed up on defense. Brent, if you want to kick this off.
Brew McCoy on offense, because I don't know that Tennessee is going to be able to line up and run it. You would like to say Jabari Small, but I don't. Tennessee doesn't have a running back who's hit the century mark this year. So I don't know that you could say a running back. So I'll go Brew McCoy on offense, and then defensively, give me Jeremy Banks. I think the linebackers are going to be really challenged, but I give me Jeremy Banks defensively. But you could pick a number of guys. I mean, Joshua Joseph, somebody off the edge as well.
I'm going to go Jalen Hyatt and Tamarion McDonald.
Yeah.
I would go Byron Young on defense, just an edge guy. And, I mean, pick your play. Brew McCoy. Give me a wide receiver, Brew McCoy. Rob, who you got?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't have anything drastically different.
Gator Dog, how do the 2024-2025 recruits view Tennessee? Is Tennessee's image improved with the younger kids? And also, do you think top transfers give Tennessee a look this spring, or do Bama and Ohio State load up again? I'll start this second one here, Austin, real quick. I mean, I don't know if they'll come to Tennessee, but I mean, LSU took 5 transfers in the defensive backfield this offseason. Sure. I know they had a lot of spots, but I mean, they took 5 in the secondary. Like, you can take more, in my opinion, right?
You can. I think that Tennessee will be an attractive destination the more they win, period. Whether it's recruiting, the transfer portal, the more you win, the flashier and, sexier you look to prospects or transfers. And so, you look at Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs had a huge game last week, but before that, I thought he had been relatively quiet on the year. I mean, Elijah Ricks, the transfer from LSU, and can't even find the field at Alabama. So, I think that transfers have to be really selective and subjective with, the schools they look at. And I think, if you're a receiver, if you're an offensive tackle, if you play on the offensive side of the ball, Tennessee's got to be a favorable destination for just about anybody. Defensively, I think you can, show, hey, we need the help. And as far as 24s and 25s, yeah, I mean, Tennessee is a way cooler destination right now than they were a year ago. The in-state kids, you just feel like you're in a better spot with a bunch of them. I mean, again, the more you get them to campus, like Boo Carter came at the end of June. He came again last weekend. He says he's coming for Alabama and then potentially Kentucky. And Kentucky makes the most sense because he plays Webb on Friday night up here the night before the Kentucky game. If he makes it to, let's just say, one of those two, that's a big deal in my mind because, you're establishing yourself with him more and more. Marcus Gorey, same thing. Any of those kids in Chattanooga, or Mari Jefferson or kids in Nashville with the Spillmans and Caleb Beasley. The more you can get Ryan Wingos to campus, the more you become a factor for them long term. So yeah, I think Tennessee's doing a really nice job of getting kids here. Kids are gravitating towards it. It's it's fast, fun, real. It's fun. And I think that kids love to have fun, and so I think the atmosphere is fun, the style of play is fun, and I think that resonates.
Yeah, it certainly helps when you're in house and you have a crowd that looks and sounds and as awesome as what it was against Florida. Chef Vol 19, with most of the secondary having the opportunity to come back next year and the staff's caution to play some of the younger guys they don't trust. Do you believe, Brent, any of the incoming freshman talent will have a legit possibility to start or play heavily next year? I guess referencing the 6 defensive backs Tennessee has committed right now.
Well, I mean, I think they'll have an opportunity. I'm not sure what young guys on the roster right now Chef's wanting them to play. Maybe at safety. Danico Slaughter's a better athlete at safety, but I don't know how much better he is. I would like to see Wesley Walker at safety, but he's not a young guy. I mean, he's a transfer who's played a ton of football. There's not 4 young guys standing on the sideline going, "Hey, put me in, coach." I mean, Brendan Turnage got in the game and didn't look like he needed to be out there. Deshaun Rucker was in the same place in the Florida game. There's opportunities for those guys, but they got to go out and show that they need to be out there as well. We'll see what D. Williams looks like this year. I don't think this staff is afraid to play young guys, particularly if you feel like it's out of necessity. And I think when you look at where the secondary is, maybe it's going to be out of necessity. My criticism for the secondary is they're loyal to those 2 safeties. And those 2 safeties have played a ton of football, but I don't know that they're any more productive now than they were 2 years ago in their career. And that would be, I think, a criticism of where you look at is the lack of development there a year ago, not playing young guys, not playing different guys at safety when you had blowout wins. Earlier this year, you're playing those 2 safeties 75 snaps in a game. You're up 4 touchdowns in. That part of it, I think, is justified because I do think that's hurt your development back there at that position a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Flowers won't be here after this year. McCullough will have the chance to come back. And I guess Flowers technically would too, but I don't.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah, he indicated like he was thinking about going pro last year. I can't imagine he's coming back again. That's just not how the kids normally, operate. But McCullough, I mean, like here's the way this thing ends one of 2 ways. Either, you make a move and said older player who's played a lot of football, but all of a sudden finds himself not playing, leaves and goes somewhere else, or you just don't improve, and get better at that position. Because, I mean, Hubbs is right. You can't tell a much difference between 2 years ago and now.
RDU Vol 21, aside from the benefit of less amped crowd at 11 a.m., do morning practices help the Vols with an early kickoff? It's about routine, right, Rob? I mean, Tennessee is used to getting up, eating breakfast, going to get taped, going to get stretched out, going to the meeting room, going out and practicing, and then getting on with their day. Now, the times won't all match up here, and it's not the exact same thing, but I think the thing that will help Tennessee more than anything with an 11 a.m. kick is a morning routine. Would you add anything to that?
I would add that not just Tennessee. I mean, I agree with you that it helps that they practice in the morning, and Coach Heupel touched on this a little bit. But what I like about it, if I'm Tennessee, is you're not sitting around the hotel all day long, killing time. Meeting in conference rooms, trying to make sure guys are occupied. Have a set. If you got a 7 p.m. kick on the road, that's a long time in the hotel trying to keep guys focused, staring at the clock. So to me, that's the biggest advantage is that you get up and you go.
Let's go to Nashville 615. Why take so many transfer defensive backs like Wesley Walker or Turrentine if you're not going to give them a chance? Flowers, McCullough, like Willie Martinez likes those guys here. But nonetheless, they want to see some more guys in the secondary play. So why haven't we seen Turrentine and Walker? Is it just simply they trust the two guys and they're just going to ride them?
I think that's a big part of it. I think Wesley Walker's injury in the preseason when he was working some at safety, when he came back from the injury, he only worked at the nickel position, didn't work at safety very much when he came back from injury. That probably set back the possibility of that being the case. And Turrentine's still a young player. I'm not saying he can't help. I'm not saying he can't play, but there's clearly a trust factor there. There's no doubt about that.
Let's go to Volunteered 87. Has Eccles coming to Knoxville this fall? He actually tweeted out, I want to say 2 days ago, that he's going to be here.
Yeah, he'll
for
be
the
here
Alabama
for the
game.
Alabama game. Yeah, I thought he was here for the Florida game. He was. Yeah, he was here for the Florida game.
Okay. Well, he's going to be back for the Alabama game because he tweeted that out. Sticking with him, I know a lot can happen in a year, but was that a commit to the first school you visit type of commitment, or does it feel like there's some staying power there with Jonathan Eccles?
It certainly feels like there's some staying power because he tweets a lot about Tennessee and he's making an effort. He comes for the Florida game and he comes for the Alabama game as a 24. To me, that there's some staying power there. I'm not saying that he's locked in. He's never going to look around. He's never going to decommit because that
it's not like it's a short trip either.
Yeah, but I mean, like you're making a real effort to get from IMG to Knoxville 2 weekends out of 4 or 5 weekends. I mean, it's. I think if he didn't show up at all, then it would be more what the poster was talking about.
One more here. How much say do teams have in their football schedule aside from scheduling out of conference games? Brent, if you look at the timing of the bye week and easy out of conference games, I can't think of a more favorable setup in recent memory.
No, it's a good setup. I mean, you schedule those out of conference games. You plug those in. Then the bye week kind of falls the way the conference schedule falls, and the league sets that schedule. I mean, Tennessee doesn't call up Greg Sankey and go, "Hey, we want to play this team on this date," and set them up that way. So you schedule your non-conference games when you schedule them, and I think it's a smart move to put a non-conference game in October as opposed to playing that game in middle of November at the end of the year. I think it benefits Tennessee to break up that gauntlet where you're not playing Alabama, Georgia, another ranked opponent, Kentucky in the month of Kentucky. Austin's mentioned that multiple times. I think that's a great setup. I think that's something Tennessee should continue to try to do to try to get a non-conference game in there to break that up.
I also think it's big, Brent, that the conference moved that Georgia game back in the year. Because there for a while it was Florida, Georgia, and then, some team, whether it's Arkansas or LSU or whoever, and Alabama. Now you have Georgia in November. And so, Georgia's going to be different in September than they are in November and vice versa. Same thing with Tennessee. But either way, you still are playing for something. Think about had you played, Florida, then turned around and played Georgia the next week, just how different the schedule would feel. Right now you're building, right? You win this game on Saturday against LSU. No matter what happens against Alabama, you're playing Kentucky, a team you beat 37 of the last 40 years or whatever the number is, for the right to go to Athens and play for the East. And that's a big deal to me to be playing in the month of November for a chance to play for the Eastern Division title for this program would just be massive. So again, you go win this one this week, you do what you do most of the time against Kentucky, and there you are playing for the East in November.
Yeah, it could make for an intriguing game. In 2016, they were playing South Carolina and Vanderbilt for the East and didn't get it done because they got the tough ones out of the way early. But I like the fact that you're playing a Florida or a Georgia late in the year. I mean, think of all those years in the 90s where everybody wanted the Florida game at the end of the year, and Florida wouldn't do that because of the Florida State game, and the conference wouldn't move that schedule around. I think it's smart on the conference's part to break up that Eastern Division, where the Eastern Division is not essentially decided by mid-October, which is what it's been for years when you had Tennessee playing Florida and Georgia, and then you had Georgia playing Florida by the middle of October in Jacksonville, and they played Tennessee early. The East race was over. There was no drama in November in the East. And so this creates some drama there, which is a smart move by the conference for TV purposes and everything else.
Athron, who would you say has made the Theo Jackson jump on both offense and defense this year? Rob, a Theo Jackson jump through 4 games. I haven't seen one. I know we spoke about Aaron Beasley kind of being on that pace, but since Juwan Mitchell's come back, his snaps have gone down a little bit. I don't think anybody's on that trajectory on either side of the football right now. Am I wrong?
Jalen Hyatt's sniffing around it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with Jalen. I'm with Rob there with Jalen. I mean, Jalen's just such a different player. And maybe it's because we know Jalen's kind of where he was mentally a year ago. And I think Theo was in a similar spot. They just didn't have a ton of confidence going into that last year because he had not really been a factor and hadn't played. So I don't think there's anybody on defense. Rob, I'm with you. I think Jalen Hyatt's sniffing at it on the offensive side of the ball because of how far he's come in a short period of time.
I'm going to add one on defense.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
I don't think you can answer it this moment, but if we look up at the end of October and he's continued his trajectory, I think Omari Thomas can be that. Now, he's not as old as Theo, but a guy that's played a couple of years now, starting to find his footing. Again, he's got to continue to play well against LSU, Alabama, UT Martin, Kentucky. If we look up after that Kentucky game, I think he could be that.
Yeah, here's where I would challenge that one a little bit. You knew that Omari Thomas was a starter coming into this year. He had already kind of established himself. I bet Omari Thomas played more snaps last year than Theo Jackson had played in his career up into his senior year, or close to it. But I do think Omari Thomas is getting better as a football player. I just don't see Omari Thomas out of the blue, and maybe you don't see Jalen Hyatt being out of the blue as well. Theo was different because nobody even thought about Theo in the spring.
No, he was left for dead. That's right.
I mean, and that's the difference. I mean, there was nobody wrote Theo Jackson even into too deep for a lot of that, and then to go be the guy he was. So both those are a little bit different. I do think Omari Thomas is getting much, much better as a football player, no doubt.
No too deep, you say. So there's hope for Brandon Turnage. I guess I don't even put Jalen Hyatt in that conversation, but I probably should, again, because he made a couple hits his freshman year, but didn't do anything last year. A couple more here from Athron. Still no Khalifa Keith offer yet. Think that will come before the weekend is out. Probably not. Austin, they want to see him play, right?
They're going to go see him play. He was hurt, but I think all indications are that's just a formality at this point.
Yeah. Let's go to NWGAVOL. Better odds of Tennessee pulling off the upset, Alabama at home or Georgia on the road for anybody?
I'm going to go Alabama at home.
Rob?
Same. I mean, I wouldn't be betting on Tennessee in either one of those games, but I just think, Alabama could be a track meet. I don't know that Tennessee stops them, and I think Tennessee can score on anybody. I don't know if they'll score enough to keep up with Alabama, but I could see that would be in, 45-38, 40, just something nuts.
If Said can get back.
Oh, well, yeah, that's for sure.
And you're just a deeper wide receiver unit. You're going to be better on the O-line than you were a year ago. Last year you played Dane Davis at right tackle against Alabama.
But can you still run the football?
Yeah, 100%. I understand, but I'm just saying, even just from a protection standpoint, I think Tennessee has a shot, to at least be in the game. Now, again, we talked about this. I've talked about this every year for the last 5 or 6. For whatever reason, Tennessee has played them closer in Tuscaloosa than they played them closer in Knoxville. Every game in Knoxville has just been a bludgeoning for the last 12 years. So, go ahead, Hubbs.
I don't think Tennessee.
Neither. They have no shot.
I don't think Tennessee's going to win either game right now. I want to see what Georgia looks like over the course of the next couple of weeks. I feel like Tennessee might match up a little better with Georgia because I'm not sure Georgia can match points. I think Alabama's getting better. If Bryce Young is not out for an extended period of time, like Gary Danielson says, then I think. Sorry, I'm going to beat that one for a horse for a while. If Bryce Young's back, I think those young receivers at Alabama are continuing to grow, get better. I think Jahmyr Gibbs. I think they're going to become really hard to stop offensively. And so you got to match points for points. When you look at this Georgia team, they're really good at tight end, but right now they don't wow you at receiver. Ladd McConkey's a solid player, but who's opposite of him? I don't know if Adonai Mitchell's going to be back or when he's going to be back. There's certainly not a Pickens running around out there. And I think they're solid at running back, but I don't think they're as good at running back as they have been. Tennessee was in the red zone 5 times against Georgia a year ago. They moved the ball as well as anybody did against Georgia. They just couldn't do anything against that Georgia front. Georgia's good. I don't know if Georgia is as good as a year ago, and I don't know that they have the edge they have a year ago. I kind of like Tennessee matched up against Georgia a little better than Alabama. Now it's at Georgia, which makes it hard. But I might lean a little bit Georgia right now.
So now on October 5th, October 5th, Hubbard picked the upset.
No, I did not. I knew that's where you're going. Go ahead, Austin. Chime on in here.
Now on the podcast, we bring in our old colleague, Jesse Simonton, for his take on Georgia. Oh, wait.
Hubbard, before we move on, are you saying if Bryce Young plays next week, will Gary Danielson compare him to the drummer from Def Leppard?
It'll be the greatest recovery in the history of college football after it was the most devastating injury in the history of college football.
Isn't it an AC sprain?
Yes, but in the middle of that Arkansas game, it was a torn rotator cuff, and
he had him amputated, buddy.
It was the most devastating injury to the history of the game of college football. The fact that he was not going to be back out there because Gary Danielson got hurt the same way.
Hey, those hurt. But look at Jordan Potts. You're back in a few weeks. 10 Vol boy in 1989, Tennessee moved receiver Carl Pickens over to help with the defensive secondary. He made a real difference. Do you think there's anyone on offense who could help like Pickens did on defense back then? Seems like the coaches don't consider that an option anymore. Why is that?
They need corner help. Carl Pickens was playing free safety and going and plucking the ball out of the air like it was a punt. Different type deal. Where Tennessee needs help is they need a skilled corner, Rob, and that was not what Carl Pickens was doing back in 1989 when Eric Cain was not a thought.
It's a different era of football too, and a different. I mean, we're talking about a head football coach who how many guys did he fire middle of the year? I mean, like I remember Doug Matthews went to left work on Tuesday as a running backs coach and got there Wednesday morning as a defensive coordinator. I know Pruitt fired the D-line coach mid-year last year, but it's just a different era. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think a kid can do it now. Do you, Hubbard?
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, with all the specialized training, Austin, I mean, yeah, you go and recruit really good athletes, but you just don't. I don't see athletes. Again, you could play free safety if you were playing an old traditional free safety where you're roaming the field back there as a receiver. But I just don't know that you can play both ways.
Let me rephrase the question. What if it was like a dime personnel? Julian Edelman came over, helped the Patriots. Troy Brown helped the Patriots a little bit. What if it was like a dime personnel?
I just don't think people do that anymore.
I agree.
I don't think it's possible you could do it, Eric. I mean, you could 100% get some of these kids to do it. Just nobody's willing to give up. The practice time is so valuable. They're not going to give up those 4 reps on wide receiver on offense to let them go play.
I mean, if you're repping it, if you're doing it all the time, like, if you spent spring practice there, if you spent fall camp doing both of them, maybe you could do it. But here after 4 games, you couldn't do like they did Carl Pickens and say, hey, you're going to play defense now.
Yeah, and I don't know who the candidates would be at the receiver spot to go play over there.
Jimmy
Holiday. Already got Cam Miller over.
Okay, Jimmy Holiday. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one, Austin. straight line speed, not a ton of lateral quickness, but maybe there. Cam Miller got moved from receiver to safety. I mean, he's a non-factor nowhere at this point. I don't think that they see him as much of a factor right now.
The easiest move would be taking Amari Thomas, putting him on the offensive line.
I just don't see a receiver making that move to the secondary. I don't see that. And I don't see Tennessee with a defensive back that you would say, hey, he's going to come over and be, an effective wide receiver either. Again, part of those two positions with all the 7-on-7 stuff, it's so much specialized training. It's just a little bit different, as Rob mentioned, than it was years ago.
Let's go to Tony Soprano. Early basketball starting 5, Rob. I was not expecting the comments about Zakai not starting, but as you pointed out, he's going to play as many minutes, if not more minutes, than most starters. So starting 5 doesn't matter.
Yeah, starting 5 really doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know. I'll throw out Josiah, Santiago, Olivier, maybe Tyreek, and I'm missing somebody.
Julian?
Yeah, maybe Julian. I mean, the better question is who's going to play, like who's going to be in the rotation and who's not. And that's going to be Josiah, Zakai, Santiago, Tyreek Key, Julian, Olivier, Urosh, and Jonas. I think those are 8 guys that are guaranteed minutes. That's a much better question than who the starting 5 is. It's like who's going to play, 18 to 25 minutes a game. And right now, I think you got 8 guys. I think BJ Edwards is pushing to be one of those guys. He's got a shot. Jamon Mashak pushing to be one of those guys. He's got a real shot. Maybe Tennessee's best all-around defender, and that's what's going to get him minutes. I mean, he's a guy that can legit guard 4 positions. So I mean, I think you've got 10 candidates that are really vying for minutes, and Rick has shown in the past he's not in love with playing, going 10 or 11 deep. So I think you better be one of the top 8 guys if you're going to get 15, 18 minutes a game.
Let's get a couple of recruiting questions in here for AP. Jeff Bleed Orange, any updates on recruits confirmed to be visiting for the Alabama game? And then anything new from Tamarian Parker, Tate, Francis, and Mpemba?
Mpemba visiting here soon. Parker will be here next week. Tate, nothing. Maui going nothing. Too much 24s. A lot of the ones that were here shot a lot again, like last weekend. The 24s, 25s will all be here. A lot of the in-state kids and a lot of the 23 commitments will be here as well.
Here's a good one. Bolt VFL, is BJ Ojalari the biggest decommitted player in the last 5 years?
Well, yeah, sure. But BJ Ojalari always wanted to go to LSU. Always. When he picked Tennessee, he wanted to pick LSU. He was picking LSU, and Tennessee got to him beforehand and convinced him to not commit to LSU and commit here. It was no shock that he decommitted and went to LSU. That's where his heart always was.
Okay.
I mean, I guess it's been more than 5 years, but man, Cecil Cherry, Dalton Santos, there's some big blows.
Who's the other one? That Otha Peters. Otha
Peters. That's a great pull right there. I couldn't think of it.
I heart Vols. AP, what was the knock on Elijah Herring that he didn't have more offers coming out of high school?
Just hadn't camped a whole lot of places, and I think some people weren't sure on him. And then I think Tennessee even at first was a little bit slow on him, and then they went, and then I think that they're so happy they did because they think he's going to be really, really good. Again, he's still got to continue to improve. I mean, even the sacks he had in the Akron game, he didn't play great fundamental football when he was out there. He's still a work in progress, like he should be. He's a freshman.
He's raw, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, they think that, he's smart, he's intelligent, he's big, he's athletic, he can run. And honestly, like a kid that kind of morphs, like the most polite, mild-mannered, nice kid off the field. and he walks across the white line like Moonlight Graham in the baseball movie.
I tell you, the greatest example of that ever. I mean, I think Elijah seems like Paris Harrelson Hubbard was.
Yeah.
I mean, that shows our age, but he was.
There's a
Field
switch.
of Dreams, Kane. Field of Dreams. I'm about to say remember the Titans, so it's just easier to say remember the baseball movie.
I'm just waiting on you to try to figure it out.
And
I wish everybody would have seen the video of that because the wheels were spinning and nothing was happening. I mean, nothing was going on.
I mean, how bad is it? I pulled Moonlight Graham, but couldn't feel Field of Dreams.
You got Oath of Peters, but couldn't remember one of Kevin Costner's biggest movies. Rob, you're exactly right on Paris Harrelson. I mean, Paris Harrelson had those glasses, all studious, and then all of a sudden he stepped on the field and he was a late hit waiting to happen, and a guy who played really, physically and aggressive. And I think Elijah's got that when he steps out there, it does flip a switch. The other thing too, Austin, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm old and I forget all of our travels. I mean, physically he changed a good bit in that spring going into his senior year, right?
Oh, he definitely did.
Like he filled out, body changed. Because I remember when we went and saw him, and I was like, he looks different.
Because we go back, go back to the COVID year, and no, seriously. And here's why I know this, because I filmed all those kids at the 7-on-7 thing they were rolling, and they were doing individual stuff, and it was Tennessee that called me and said, "Hey, how tall are you?" Because they watched our video. They watched my interview with him, and they were blown away at his size with the shirt off, and then how tall he was. They thought because he hadn't been up here around them that he was shorter than he was. And it's the old thing: how tall is AP? How tall is AP? When we get those on the board when I'm standing beside a recruit, and Tennessee pulled that in this instance. How tall are you?
You're like.
And so then they're like, well, he's a lot bigger than we thought he was. And I said, yeah, he's a great looking kid. And next thing you know, boom, boom, boom. And here they come. And they. But
he put on muscle by the time he got here, didn't he?
Yeah, he's put on the right kind of weight. Hubbs is right in that regard. But he was already, if you go back and watch the video of him working out, I mean, his arms are already well developed. And that was summer of 2020. That was during COVID. So, yeah, he's gotten bigger, but he was already, whereas like Caleb is, Caleb's got to get his butt in the weight room. Elijah's on Caleb all the time, like you've got to, Caleb weighs like 208. Like, he's got to get, more and more and more, and he's got the frame to do it. He's going to be a monster. Like when he gets up here, I think the best thing he can do is get back around his brother, because those two will push each other, drive each other. When they get up here and get in that weight room, get in the nutrition program. By the way, before we go, I do want to tell some stories here. Since I was out and watching Nico, I got the biggest kick out of watching Josh Heupel ask for kids to get tackled, turn the ball over. Because you fly 3,000 miles, and at this point, like Nico went touchdown. He had thrown 3 passes. At that point, it's 27-0 because they ran the opening kickoff back. And you drive all that way, and the last thing you want to do is watch him throw 3 passes. So watching him, beg for kids to get tackled and this and that, so Nico could get the ball back or have more opportunities to throw. I got the biggest kick out of that just because, he was just funny.
Let's do 2 more on this matchup, and then let's get out of here. This is Hard Hat Vol, D-line versus their O-line. Thinking this could be a key to winning the football game. What say you, and can you analyze the matchup? Brent, I think there's opportunity there. That offensive line's been kind of makeshift. They haven't had the same starting 5 for the majority of the season. They kind of been doing some patchwork. I think, obviously, we've talked about the ends having to make a difference, and Barron and Josephs and, of course, Young. But, Amari Thomas in there as well. I do think that Tennessee can affect the game from its front compared to their front in this regard.
Well, look, LSU, Rob, likes to play physical. They want to come downhill, right? 196 yards a game rushing or something like that is what they're averaging. Yet their quarterback has twice as many carries as any of the other running backs. It's truly running back by committee. But Tennessee's going to have to defend between the tackles, and I think Rodney Garner's guys did a good job of that at Pittsburgh with the exception of one run. But it'll be a test for those guys up there. I don't think this is the best version of the LSU offensive line, but they're going to try to get after you physically.
Yeah, I agree. And even when you like throw out their, their cupcake games against New Mexico State and Southern. I mean, they're averaging right at 200 yards a game in their 2 SEC games. So those running stats aren't padded. And just based off, I'm with you, Hubbard. I thought, with the exception of the one bust at Pittsburgh, that Tennessee did a pretty nice job there. And I don't know how great Florida is on the ground, but that was one of the most impressive things to me about the day, was how Tennessee really, controlled them. Didn't, and a lot of that you worry about was Anthony Richardson, and that's a lot of what you're worried about this week is the mobile quarterback. And Tennessee lost him a couple times, but he didn't gash him for a 60-yard touchdown run or anything like he's capable of. And I think that kind of discipline and paying attention to your assignments is going to be huge this week, because like you said, Hubbard, Daniels has twice as many carries as anybody, so that tells me that being disciplined and being able to contain a mobile quarterback is priority number one for your run defense this week.
Last one is going to go to Rocky Top, Tennessee, or TN. Is Nico the type of prospect that could see considerable playing time in his freshman season? An example of this could be where Clemson moved on from Kelly Bryant in favor of Trevor Lawrence by the 5th game back in 2018.
We'll have to wait and see. I mean, is Nico a generational player? I think Trevor Lawrence has proven to be that he's going to be that kind of guy, right? You look at what he's doing in his second year in Jacksonville. It's amazing what happens when you get some good coaching down there with them. And Doug Peterson's done a really good job putting that offense together. And you're seeing Trevor Lawrence take off in his second year in the NFL. He obviously was a really good player at Clemson, generational type guy, playing for championships.
Daniels was a fan, yeah.
Rob, I think, everybody loves the next guy coming in. I think Nico's got a world of talent, but what's the adjustment to college like for him?
I mean, you just can't say that about any high school player and projected in football. I don't think. I mean, especially at quarterback. I mean, you just never know. I mean, he's insanely talented. I mean, you flip on the tape and it's hard. I mean, it's impossible not to be impressed. I mean, it jumps off the screen at you. But, I mean, you could just start rattling off the quarterbacks who have been, sure things and ended up, being misses. And I mean, I'm not saying at all that Nico's that. I'm just saying that that's the nature of the beast. I mean, you just can't sit here midway through a kid's senior year in high school and say, oh yeah, he's going to play a significant amount of snaps in the SEC next fall. You just can't do it.
Just like you can't say that college guy is going to go into his rookie year in the NFL, or he's going to go into the NFL and be the answer, in the NFL either. I mean, it's just a tough transition, but there's all the talent in the world, and there's no reason to say that Nico can't, but he's got to go out and prove it. So it's hard to project that one.
And he's also going to be competing against a guy that's going to be in his third year of the system and 6 year in college, 6 year of college football. I mean, 23-year-old against an 18-year-old. I mean, that's going to be a steep hill.
Yep. We'll have to see. A little too early to project that, but nonetheless, he'll be in there competing for it. And next spring will be fun to see what he looks like for Tennessee over the course of 15 spring practices. That's going to do it for this edition of the Mailbag Podcast. Got to most of the questions, had a whole lot this week, so really do appreciate you guys for sending those in every single week for the Thursday Mailbag question. Mailbag Podcast. $1 for 1 year. Get it while it's hot. Big game coming up on Saturday. You don't want to miss any of our pregame coverage, game day coverage, and postgame coverage, all for Tennessee and LSU. $1 for 1 year. Get it while it's hot. And as always, please support the site on YouTube by searching and liking our videos on YouTube. That is Volquest. For Austin Price, Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Cain. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us here today, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast every week right here on Volquest.